Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today, our topic of discussion is the speeches that were made by Sushma Swaraj and Maliha Lodhi at the UNGA. But before we go on to discuss the content of those speeches, we would like you to take a look at this short film by a girl from occupied Kashmir, and that should put things in perspective. So take a look at this film and we'll be right back.
This generation will be blind. Come, let's visit Kashmir. This is the future generation of Kashmir, laying on hospital beds, blinded. A weapon called pellet gun is blinding the people of Kashmir, mostly teens and children. Young teens have lost their hopes. They see no future now. Who were these rebels, and who did this to them? Is demanding freedom a crime? Every victim thinks. They too had seen dreams, but now their life is dark. The pellets have pierced their eyes, leaving them in despair. Not able to see the world, they are suffering mental agony and pain. With their families shattered, hopes lost, and wet eyes, they're scared to face the world, because the oppressors may catch them. The children have lost their childhood, their fantasies. Their mothers are wailing, sitting beside them in hospital beds. These blooming buds will unfortunately have to live a life of misery. The dwellers of heaven are bearing the pain that of hell. But Almighty, no one can suppress these rebellions. Every second hour, pellets rupture and I hear. More than 664 people are hit in the eyes since the uprising and are still counting. This is the heaven Kashmir, yelling out to the world. When cruelty makes flow blood streams, O people, thou shalt witness and tell. It can withstand even an ocean of screams when heaven is turned into a living hell.
What you just heard was the voice of a girl from Kashmir who is talking about her plight and telling the world what is actually happening in Kashmir, no matter what India may have to say. Just take a short break. We'll be right back and discuss what happened at the UNGA. We'll be right back. Welcome back after the break. And joining me in the studio for the discussion is Mohammed Sheeraz, who is an academician. Thank you for being here, Sheeraz. And just to get the conversation started, I'd like to play the clip in which Malia Lodhi is addressing the UNGA, where she speaks about the atrocities that India is committing in Kashmir. So let's hear what she had to say and then begin our conversation.
Pakistan has in its custody an Indian spy, an intelligence officer, Kulbhushan Yadav, who confessed to India's support to terrorist activities in my country. In fact, India has considerable experience in the state sponsorship of terrorism in our region. It has sponsored and perpetrated terrorism and aggression against all its neighbors, creating terrorist groups, destabilizing and blockading neighbors to do its strategic bidding, and sponsoring subversion, sabotage, and terrorism in various parts of Pakistan. All this establishes that India is the mother of terrorism in South Asia.
And that's the statement that's very important to note. India is the mother of terrorism in South Asia. That is what Malia Lodhi has contended, and of course there is much truth in that statement. Sheeraz, after listening to Madam Malia's statement, do you think that we can go beyond the rhetoric and convince the world that what Malia Lodhi is saying is in fact the truth? And India is quite good at hiding behind semantics and using its very prodigious media industry to cover up its ill doings and wrongdoings. So do you think that this statement by Malia Lodhi at the UNGA would have gone down well with the rest of the world who were there attending it?
Thank you. I would say that this is the right approach, the right policy, because we need to deal with them more aggressively and upfront, diplomatically. We need to give a very clear message, not only to the international community, but also to Indians as well, to the Indian state, because we have been trying friendly gestures since long, but that has only resulted in further aggression or war of words from Indian side. And not only war of words, we have seen what kind of environment they have created on the LOC and on the working boundary as well. Our citizens are losing life over there. They are suffering all kind of damages and all kind of you can say disadvantage, So I think it's very important that this policy should be sustained, not only in this on these forum, but otherwise as well. Our media can also play a very important and significant role, not only television or other electronic media, but also the print media. So we need to put forward our soldiers, as mentioned in many previous conversations as well. If military safeguards your territorial boundaries, it's the intellectuals, the media, the academia, the soft side of the country, which basically safeguards your professors and teachers who safeguard your boundaries, your intellectual, your image, and your diplomatic fronts as well. So I think more emphasis now is required on this side of because this is one segment of what Pakistan should do about India's repeated allegations against Pakistan. And at the same time, they are doing state, they're sponsoring state, as mentioned by Ambassador Malia Lodhi as well, about how it is sponsoring sponsoring terrorism in other states, like in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Sri Lanka, and there are so other, wherever it is just trying to overpower everyone in the region. Because that is not, you cannot overpower everyone in the region. Every state is sovereign as you are. So you have to understand that reality. Pakistan is a fact. They need to know that. Either they want to know it through aggressive language or through other means. They need to realize that, and the only thing that they're afraid of, that if they have a progressive, strong Pakistan on their as a neighbor, it is going to be difficult for them to compete with not only Pakistan but with China as well. So this is a lose-lose game for India now. I think it is something out of frustration, and this frustration is leading to Indian aggression, not only on the LOC but on the verbal front as well. You look at the kind of involvement they have shown in our cities, in our provinces, Balochistan, Karachi, and now their links have been exposed with Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan as well, and what they have been doing on the other side. We will definitely discuss on this in detail later, but I think now it's the responsibility of the international community as well to come forward, because it's not a game of, you can say, kids. It's a game of states who are weaponized with nuclear capabilities. So it's a very serious issue, because that can lead to something which the world community will not be able to control, but even imagine. So look at the kind of atrocities. Then coming back to the atrocities side of Indian state terrorism, Kashmir, who cannot. I think if you can't see that, I don't know what else you want to know, that what kind of force is being used against the civilians over there, unarmed civilians over there, the political movement. I usually say that it's an example of rocks against nuclear weapons. You know, whatever is taking place. If people are asking for their right of self-determination, their right to freedom, you know, and because of that, they are using whatever possible means they can. They are using rocks, they are using sticks, and on the other end, there is a nuclear armed, one of the largest democracies in the world, so-called democracies in the world. So what kind of comparison is that? Where is the international community? Where is international media? Regardless of the fact what Pakistan says, regardless of the fact what Muslim countries are saying, it's a humanitarian issue. It's everyone's problem at the end of the day.
Unfortunately, the way the Indian media and the Indian government spins the reality in Kashmir, unfortunately that message is taken, or rather lapped up by the rest of the world far more quickly and easily than the truth, which is Pakistan's point of view in first of all implementing the UN resolutions on Kashmir that have not been done to this day. So why is it that the world community is silent and sleeping on the matter for the past 70 years and not even willing to listen to Pakistan's concerns and the humanitarian issues of the Kashmiris?
And then again, who's the world community? Either you are pointing towards West or East. That is very important. Right now, what usually we end up pointing, whenever we say international community, we mean that the West, and West has all its eggs in one basket in this region, that is India, because of the fact that on the other side, another power is challenging their global dominance, that is China. So they are making sure that it doesn't take place, or they want to delay it as much as possible through means such as India. I think India on its own is way off target, because India has to remain in this region. And an isolated India will serve nobody's purpose, not even their own purpose, because that is the reality, that is the change. These are the changing dynamics of the global politics. As far as the representation is concerned, as well as the role of media is concerned, and the international community, I would say it is unjust, it is deliberate, and it is done for their own vested interest as far as the international community is concerned. As mentioned earlier, Kashmir is not just a Muslim issue. Kashmir is not just a territorial issue. It's a humanitarian issue which can lead to a nuclear war. So it is not just something between two states. It's not bilateral or regional. It's a global thing. The implications will be far-reaching, and you will not be able to apprehend or control the consequences. So why not take the right steps now? Indian media is playing their role in whatever capacity they can.
Right. But unfortunately, if you look at what the support that was given to the Indian point of view by Afghanistan and Bangladesh of all countries, so they were very vehement and very eager, tripping over themselves to support what the Indian narrative at the UNGA was, despite the fact it being completely false. So what does that show you about Pakistan's position in the region?
Afghanistan, first of all, Afghanistan. The regime over there highly depends on India and United States of America, for that matter. So they have no other choice. To call that Afghanistan, the government in Afghanistan is as yet a sovereign government, I would say it's too early to say that. So we cannot exactly see or reflect Afghanistan's opinion as clearly as now. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, I think there are previous grudges, they are still there, and they are playing a role. Otherwise, Bangladesh is equally threatened by India as much as any other country within the region. So for the moment, okay, fine, for the sake of their point scoring for that matter, it may work for them. But in the later stages, even the Bangladeshi intellectuals and the people who can see beyond vision, they know that the one thing that is going to directly threaten us and dominate us to a level where we have no sovereignty is the Indian state. So that is one way of seeing it. I think Bangladesh is making another mistake by siding with India on these issues, because eventually these issues will come back to their home as well. So it's very important that rather than for short-term goals, all the regional players should look, or all the regional countries should move beyond their positions and look for what is in the interest of the region. A nuclear conflict in this region...
That's very well said, Sheeraz, but unfortunately the reality on the ground is the opposite. And we are seeing that a number of regional countries are ganging up against Pakistan in the situation. And Pakistan is the one that India has orchestrated to isolate within the region. And to some degree, if we look at the rhetoric that's emanating from Afghanistan and Bangladesh, they seem to have achieved partially
we are seeing
objective.
A divide now, East and West, and definitely West has some old allies, and Pakistan has always been the game changer against the Soviets, and now in this competition as well. Pakistan has a central role, and if Pakistan changes its stance from a security state to a more economically progressive state in the region, Pakistan will be able to supersede all the countries within the South Asian region, which is obviously a direct threat, because right now India is enjoying that status, but in the next 10 to 20 years, that's what India is afraid of, that's what frustrates India, that's what gives them sleepless nights now, that once Pakistan, you can say, corrects its trajectory, then it's going to be impossible for any country to stop it from gaining its positive political, diplomatic and economic goals. So that is one reason of it, because the countries you have pointed out, like Bangladesh, like Afghanistan and India, at the moment they are in the Western camp.
Right. Okay, we've also been joined by Yasir Masood, who's in the studio with us. Thank you very much, Yasir, for being here.
Thank you.
Yasir, a few of the commentators or observers at the UNGA, when witnessing India and Pakistan's tirade against each other, got the impression of a very unprofessional or sort of a childish almost attitude, and there was a lot of tit-for-tat blame game going on, but there was no positive direction in which the issues could be addressed. So in your opinion, what do you think should have been the way that Pakistan should have tackled Sushma Swaraj's tirade, which had no basis in fact at all? But of course we had a good response from Malia Lodhi, but there are some critics who think that the response should have been slightly different.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Waqas. And I think so it is not for the first time that these sort of stances are emanating from Indian side, whether be it's on the political front, diplomatic front, and as well as media, and also the civil society as well. So it seems like over the years, since the Modi government is in place, it looks like that they are promoting more jingoism and extremism in their society. Now same thing is being reflected at such a high platform, where it was initiated by Sushma Swaraj. And it is not the first time, as I said. On every podium, on different occasions, such kind of baseless blames have been shown towards Pakistan. But I think so that Pakistan has given a very rightly response and at the right time. And this is the way. Instead, even if there are certain commentators who are commenting about unprofessionalism, but then I think so it is the time that we have to pay the response in same coins, because it has enough. And why Pakistan should consider itself...
Do you think that paying the response in the same coin is actually going to solve the situation? Don't you think it's going to exacerbate the situation further and take us further away from arriving at a position where both parties can sit together and have a dialogue, when such kind of rhetoric is obviously going to make the parties go further and further away. And isn't that what India wants? India's objective is to let Kashmir keep on simmering and burning, and they don't want to even address the issue. So if Pakistan also reacts the same way as India does, then isn't Pakistan playing into their hands and actually helping them to continue with their agenda?
Well, I partially agree with you, because yes, in that sense you're right that Pakistan should not give such responses, but then you see, Waqas, Pakistan has been doing this for about 4 to 5 years now. And now, as I've been saying this many a times, that it's no less than an embarrassment that Pakistan has always been extending its peaceful arm towards India. But then why I'm of the view that Pakistan should give them response belligerently, because India might get this impression over the years that Pakistan is a kind of state that, in spite of Pakistan's anchor role as far as peace is concerned, we always have positive overtures to our neighbors. But it does not mean that we cannot take such stances, because if it is unjust, and if it is based on if these such kinds of statements are baseless and berserk, then Pakistan knows how to respond. That is my point. So India should not get this impression, and they should not live in this self-denial that Pakistan does not have the responses, because for how long you can take that, especially at the UNGA, where it's like an eye center for the whole world. And if such baseless stances are coming from their side, I think Pakistan had to respond. There was no other choice, because we have to defend ourselves. It's not about the responses. It's about telling the people and knowing and giving this message to the whole world, across the world, that Pakistan is not a terrorist state. In fact, who's terrorist? Because and this has been witnessed by all of the countries now, that India is manipulating, India is pouring in huge funds to destabilize Pakistan, and we have had the proofs of it, which we have given to India. But it's India's choice. Let them live in self-denial. And for us, the core issue is Kashmir. If we don't talk about that, what else is remaining between India and Pakistan?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. But there's another aspect which also needs to be, in fact, it was highlighted, but I think it has to be highlighted even with more vigor and more elan, I suppose. Sheeraz, the thing is that the LOC violations have increased 100-fold in the past couple of years. And every second, third day we hear about Indian aggression on the LOC, and then Pakistan giving a befitting response. And that seems to be escalating day by day. So isn't that one of the things that the international community should see as a sign of India's designs and India's blatant lies that it is propagating on the world stages?
So far, India has been very successfully been able to implement Chankya Kautilya's one principle, that lie to an extent where lie doesn't remain a lie. So that's what their media is doing so far. So that at the moment, as I mentioned earlier...
Well, I wouldn't say that the entire media is doing that, because I also read articles in the Hindustan Times, for example, which categorically stated that the pellet guns that are being used in Kashmir need to be stopped. So there are voices within India that are also accepting the malpractices and the oppression that Indian government is perpetuating in the held valley of Kashmir. Well, that's Indian authors.
That's obviously an internal situation where there will be certain people who are on the right side of the line. But the important thing is, what are the international global interests? So that is very important, because if the interests are in favor of an Indian state, I think those interests can drive the international community or the great powers, the world great powers, to turn a blind eye to what India is doing in Kashmir, for that matter, or on the LOC or working boundary, or the kind of interference it exercises in other countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan, and not only these two, other countries in the South Asian region as well. So that is very important. That needs to be understood. So I think then again we need to move forward cautiously, but at the one end we have to have a very clear message. We very clearly said in the same session that we don't want to be an scapegoat for anyone.
Right.
So that is another clear message to the Indian authorities, that this kind of propaganda will lead you nowhere. This is not going to make us budge on the right and diplomatic support of the Kashmiris, which they were promised 70 years ago. So this state-sponsored terrorism needs to end, not only for the sake of humanity, but for the sake of regional and global peace as well. So that needs to be understood on those lines, because international politics are these kind of messages are very complex. They are not subjected for one country only. They are subjected for multiple actors. So that is why India has been trying to label us something which is already there in the air. So it's Pakistan's responsibility to respond diplomatically at the forefront. Use the diplomatic card, use the diplomatic powerful card, when if as an analogy, diplomatic nuclear power.
All right, Yasir, one of the interesting statements made by Sushma Swaraj was also kind of a funny statement, to say the least. And that statement was that India has produced doctors and engineers, whereas Pakistan has just produced terrorists. How do you view this silly statement, and what would be your response?
Well, it's no less than a mockery, that's what I can say, because you see, such kind of statements which are completely, baseless, which does not have any logic, which does not have any reasoning. Now, if we can ask the same question, that who's Kulbhushan Yadav? Is he a doctor, engineer, or a professor? Obviously, he's a terrorist. And what India is doing in our country, I think so, it is India who's, producing terrorists and branded as terrorists for Pakistan, specifically tailored and made for Pakistan, like Kulbhushan Yadav. And we have so many other examples. So these kind of statements also show their immaturity, that especially at this podium, at this platform, where India is producing engineers and doctors, fair enough, but it does not mean that there are terrorists all around in Pakistan. I think so. If you see the ratio of population, we have been producing more engineers, more doctors, and more professors, you name it, from every profession. And it is, I think so, she should fix her mind in a sense that Pakistani people and Pakistani engineers, Pakistani sportsmen are our ambassadors who are working and shining our name in the entire world. So
absolutely.
It is
well, let's hear
there
is another part of the statement that Malia Lodi spoke, and let's hear that statement and then continue our conversation.
India's proclivity to violence is also no secret. In the 70 years since its independence, India has been engaged in at least over a dozen instances of the use of force and continues to face 17 insurgencies in its own land. It has fought a war with or in each of its neighbors. All I can say about India's current political luminaries is that they belong to a political organization that has the blood of thousands of Muslims of Gujarat on their hands. Today, this so-called democracy is the world's largest hypocrisy. This, Mr. President, is the face of India's democracy.
Well, even if that was not the face, it was a pretty close likeness. So let's move on with that statement. Sheeraz, Malia Lodi is saying that it is not the world's largest democracy, but rather the greatest hypocrisy being witnessed by the world today. And not only that, but it also, she began her statement by saying that for 70 years we've stood the brunt of India's aggression, and this very fact that India has in this past 70 years been unable to reconcile with the creation of Pakistan. For them, they still live in a pipe dream world where they think that Pakistan is itching to reunite with India, and that this is what their ultimate goal may be. So why is it that they cannot digest the creation of Pakistan, when it is because of their very fascist attitude, the fascism and inherent in the Hindu caste system is also responsible for creating the kind of society that we witness in India today, and it's a very polarized one. So what do you think should be a response?
I think they cannot get the one fact out of their mind, that Muslims led them for 300 plus years, and that is the kind of jealousy they
Apparently,
had.
they're also rewriting history in their school books,
Exactly.
trying to
So-
show that the Mughals were not
So
there.
there is a historic legacy beyond what they are, the kind of aggression and the kind of unacceptability they have shown so far. So that's probably one reason. And secondly, after 1947, Pakistan has suffered a lot. And then again, it has revived itself as a state, as a strong state. Now it's moving towards from a hard state to a soft state. So that is what threatens their stature in the South Asian region. Who other states can confront them but Pakistan? So Pakistan is the only hurdle in their way, not only a permanent seat in the Security Council, but also their dominance in the region. So China, far apart, they cannot even compete with Pakistan. That's the reason why they want Pakistan, why they want a weaker Pakistan. So that is their dream, which will never come. I think then again, it's the century, it's the time where India should move beyond these extremist attitudes and towards other humanitarian issues. Human security is now the center of the problem, but they are still insisting on extremist policies. RSS, as you have mentioned about that, the kind of atrocities they have been involved in, and the kind of you can say atrocities not only against the minorities but also against women in the same country. You know, that is very important. That needs to be highlighted as well.
Delhi was called the rape capital of the world at one point.
If that's what the capital is called, the rape capital, then you can understand what kind of people are governing that capital and what can be expected from there. So that needs to be highlighted. There are certain weaknesses on our side as well. We cannot say we have sailed so far so good. No, we need to put our perspective, our narrative in the right direction. We need to generate and produce more, I think, as mentioned about other professions. We have been very outstanding, like doctors, engineers. We have successful doctors which are providing services and globally, and they are renowned as well. They are engineers, and there are so many other. We now need to focus on the social sciences. That's where we lack. And that's, if you ask me, one cause of the image which Pakistan is suffering at the moment is because we are almost absent from the social science front in the intellectual ground, in the intellectual arena. So we need to understand its significance as well. It pays you more, if not in hard currency, but in soft currency, and that's what matters in the 21st century. So we need to work on those lines, I would say. As far as the threat to India is concerned, if Pakistan's progress is a threat to India, if Pakistan's well-being is a threat to India, then India should really worry, because it's for real.
Okay, Yasir, another thing that Madam Sushma Swaraj tried to project to the world was this thought or this idea that the Indians are very eager or were willing to have a discourse with Pakistan or to have a dialogue with Pakistan to resolve issues without any preconditions, they say. How true is that statement? And when it has always been Pakistan who've been bending over backwards to ask the Indians to engage with them in a dialogue, but the Indians refuse to do that time and time again. And yet, when they go onto the world stage, they present the picture to be in reverse. How can they lie so blatantly on the world stage when it is Pakistan who has been requesting them to have a dialogue to discuss the core issues, and they're the ones who go around telling the world that they're the ones who would like to dialogue, and Pakistan is the one that is reluctant? And then moreover, they say that until and unless terrorism is eliminated by Pakistan, from Pakistan, they will not engage in a dialogue. So what is this doublespeak? How is anybody supposed to make sense of this?
Well, double standards at its best. That's all I can say. And it's not saleable anymore, this kind of argument or this kind of statement. Because for a matter of fact, as you just mentioned, that it is Pakistan who's pleading and trying on different platforms. Because you see, India's problem is that they want to keep the situation or dialogue bilateral. They want to refuse on the multilateral platforms as well, fair enough. But when it comes to bilateral dialogues, it is always Pakistan, and history is witness to this fact that it is always Pakistan who's been trying its best, but India has been denying. And you know what? What is the reason now that India is over and over again not being able to come on the table talks? Because she also said in her speech that introspection is needed. So yes, introspection is so much needed, especially for India, because in reality what is happening, it is beyond any shadow of a doubt that the worst atrocities are being done in Kashmir. Now, how is it possible for any country, if it's not Pakistan, if it's another state, and if it is happening on the neighbor side from India, or then what would be the response? Do you think that we will be winking at the Kashmir issue and will highlight other issues which does not have any logic and does not have any reasoning or any grounds? So the problem is that Pakistan wants to highlight India's true image to the world, and that's where it is very important for us that we need to further focus upon this. And India in response, I tell you what, Indians are very popular as far as their negative projection is concerned. They are the best masters for making another country, and they have some sort of planning how to project, how to implement and eclipse their own nefarious designs, and instead put all the blames on other countries, including Pakistan. Another important factor is that India should stop behaving like a fake hegemon in the region. India is not the policeman of South Asia, or India is not responsible for whatever happens in the region. India is itself, considering other states as their subordinate states, as we know that in Myanmar, Bangladesh, or any other country. And for Pakistan, as my colleague just mentioned, yes, it is itching them to the most because of our progress, because we have been considered as a security state alone, but now we are diverting and we are moving towards from security state to a more vibrant economic country, and that's where India feels panicky. India is in a sort of threat because it is only Pakistan who can have eyeball to eyeball confrontation with India, be it on political front, be it on diplomatic front, or be it on economic front as well. So that's where India wants to further extend its hegemony in the region. India should stop this. And introspection, as I mentioned, is very much desired and very much needed, because such kinds of statements are not going to do any good either to India or either to Pakistan. So they should, sanity should prevail. They should come up with some pragmatic solutions, even if dialogue are concerned. Yes, our arms are open. We do not shy away from talking about terrorism or about any other issue, but for that India needs to come on the table. And that's where the problem is. Now, if India doesn't want to have a dialogue, if India is not coming on the peace negotiation table, then India does not have any right to project and label Pakistan and put all the blame on Pakistan that it is Pakistan which is refusing. I mean, this is the double standards and double speak at its best, as I just mentioned.
Absolutely. Well, Sheeraz, let's talk about the very important project for Pakistan, and that is CPEC. And India has also declared its antagonism towards this project and has also tried to sabotage it, as we have mentioned, in the form of Kulbhushan Yadav. He's the only one who got caught, but I'm sure there are other operatives that are operating. And there were 8 diplomats who were expelled from Pakistan who were caught spying. In fact, it was their brief to destabilize the country, as well as specially targeted at destabilizing or damaging the CPEC project. So having said that, do you think that the rest of the world would also be able to take cognizance of this fact? As Yasir has been saying about the double speak and the double standards and the hypocrisy being displayed by India, do you think that that would have actually been understood by the powers gathered there?
Well, because I think it's for Pakistan, it's an uphill task. In other words, Pakistan needs to put its not only its own house in order, but also has to play a very vigorous and active role on the international diplomatic front as well. Because at the moment, India is obviously is more you can say, in good terms with the international community because of many reasons, because of the market they offer, because what of the kind of economic possibilities which lie there in India, the kind of relationship India enjoys with the United States of America, the strategic partnership. So that is, the realities should be kept in mind, but it doesn't mean that Pakistan has no significance. Pakistan has a significance of its own in the region, not only for India but for the rest of the world as well. So Pakistan and CPEC, as mentioned earlier, if this part of Asia is going to be the heartland in the coming 21st century and other prevailing centuries, I would say that China will be the balancer. If China is the balancer, then Pakistan is the jugular vein of that, economic activity. Nobody can deny that. And that is a kind of a permanent threat to Indian hegemonic designs, not only in the region but globally as well. Look at the kind of you can say advantages being offered to India, the kind of you can say other incentives being offered to India on all fronts. Why? Because on the one end, India is the only chance against China in the region, and on the other end, Pakistan is the only challenge to India in the region, because that is what is considered within the Indian policy making circles the hurdle, because they cannot confront China directly because they yet have to resolve issues with another smaller state, in other words, but strong enough state to give them a check of reality that it needs to be done otherwise. Because when they talk about negotiations and peace in Kashmir, talking about in Kashmir, the policies, the policy of rape, pellet guns, the kind of forces they have there, 700,000 plus forces. What kind of peace are you talking about? When you condition peace is the only way forward. When you condition, we can only talk when there is peace. So if you want peace, first of all, remove the forces from there, and then we'll have peace.
Absolutely. Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd like to say that it is India that is avoiding sitting with Pakistan and trying to resolve all our outstanding issues, and that's what the world needs to understand, that it is blaming the victim, which is Pakistan in this case, and we hope that the rest of the world can see through this lies that India is perpetuating. With that hope, and on that note, it's goodbye.